Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel, and I'm 35. For years, I was the quiet, reliable anchor for my parents and my younger sister, Sarah, always the one cleaning up their emotional and financial messes. Despite my constant support, their resentment festered. The final, brutal blow wasn't a fight. It was a cold, formal text message sent from a joint family account. "We need distance from you. Please stop contacting us completely." They didn't even have the decency to call. They cut me off without warning, shattering my world. But their abandonment freed me from the burden of their expectations, allowing me to finally focus on my own long-deferred professional dream. My revenge wasn't loud. It was slow, surgical, and involved becoming the one person they would desperately need. And I made sure they knew they could never reach me again. Before we begin, let me know where in the world you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing how far our community reaches. If you want to see an abandoned son turn a devastating text into the greatest victory of his life, please like, share, and subscribe. The text message arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, delivered with the cold, impersonal efficiency of a bill or a junk email. It wasn't from one person, but a collective number they used for important family announcements, signed simply Mom, Dad, and Sarah. The words were sharp, concise, and utterly devastating. "We need distance from you. Please stop contacting us completely." My name is Daniel. I was 35 years old, a mid-level software engineer, living a comfortable, if somewhat constrained, life. For the past 15 years, I had been the quiet, reliable anchor for the Wallace family, sacrificing my prime professional development years to ensure their fragile world didn't collapse. The sacrifice wasn't just financial, it was existential. My father, Frank, a perpetual optimist with zero business sense, cycled through 3 failed ventures: a high-end coffee shop that hemorrhaged money, a disastrous real estate flipping scheme, and finally a baffling online vintage comic store that never turned a profit. Each failure required me to quietly liquidate portions of my savings, totaling nearly $150,000 over a decade, all categorized by them as temporary loans that were never repaid. They leveraged my sense of duty, constantly reminding me, "Family helps family, Daniel. You have the stable income, we have the dreams." My mother, Carol, managed the emotional side of the dependency. She suffered from chronic anxiety, which was invariably triggered by any perceived stress or minor inconvenience in her life. This meant I spent countless weekends driving an hour across town to manage minor crises: a leaky faucet, a conflict with a neighbor, or simply an overwhelming feeling of ennui. I was her unpaid, on-call therapist, and my time, my weekends, and my peace of mind were entirely consumed by maintaining her fragile equilibrium. If I dared to decline, the passive aggression was immediate. "Well, I suppose I'll just have to deal with this massive, crushing stress alone, won't I? Thanks for nothing, Daniel." My younger sister, Sarah, 29, was the most draining of all. She was a perpetual student and artist whose volatile relationships and sporadic career changes demanded constant intervention, financial support, and ego-stroking. She relied on me for rent assistance, car repairs, and legal fees when her boyfriend troubles inevitably landed her in civil court. I often felt like I was funding her perpetual adolescence. Despite my constant, quiet support, a deeper resentment festered within all 3 of them. They resented that I had stability. They resented that they possessed the resources they desperately needed. And most of all, they resented the debt of gratitude they owed me. They mistook my reliability for weakness, my calm for lack of ambition, and my generosity for infinite supply. The text was a preemptive strike. They didn't want the awkwardness of explaining why they were taking a costly midwinter cruise without me, funded undoubtedly by the last loan they insisted they paid back. They simply wanted the resource, my money and time, without the obligation, allowing them to bask in the self-righteous glow of establishing boundaries, while effectively stealing their freedom. They were cutting the cord, not because I was toxic, but because I was inconveniently good, and worse, a constant reminder of their own incompetence. I stared at the screen for an hour, the blue light reflecting the sheer, staggering brutality of the dismissal. It wasn't an argument, it was an execution. There was no room for negotiation, no explanation, no farewell. The pain was immediate and visceral, a physical punch to the gut. The world, which had been organized around their needs, suddenly snapped into an unnerving silence. I felt an overwhelming sense of abandonment, humiliation, and, beneath it all, a fragile, terrifying freedom. They had finally severed the cord of obligation I had felt for 15 years. I was finally allowed to be selfish. My life pivoted instantly. I wiped the tears, deleted their number, and threw away the box of family photos, purging the past with surgical precision. I opened the old, dusty business plan I had shelved since my late 20s. Ion Tech Solutions, a specialized firm focused on developing proprietary machine learning models for niche financial fraud detection. It was ambitious, required massive capital, and would demand every ounce of my time and intellectual energy. My family's last action was to give me the most valuable commodity I could have ever asked for: uninterrupted silence and freedom from obligation. I immediately executed the most radical financial and personal overhaul of my life. I sold my modest house in the suburbs, the house I intended to expand for my future family, close enough to my parents for easy access, and liquidated every other non-essential asset, including my expensive classic car and my entire stock portfolio. I moved into a minimalist, high-rise studio apartment downtown, a place where no one knew me and where the only sound was the distant city traffic. I poured every cent of the equity, a total of $180,000, into Aon Tech Solutions. This was the moment of no return. I used the money to hire 2 brilliant, hungry engineers from MIT and secure a year's worth of expensive, high-capacity cloud computing contracts. For the next 2 years, I lived and breathed Aon Tech. My schedule was brutal: 18 hours a day dedicated to coding, system architecture, and finding our first key client. I channeled the pain, the abandonment, and the residual confusion into absolute, focused professional drive. Every complex algorithm I built, every client pitch I delivered, was fueled by the cold memory of that text message. They called me disposable. I was determined to become indispensable. I realized that the time I wasted managing their crises had built up an intellectual pressure cooker. Freed from their gravity, that pressure turned into pure, generative fuel. My coding became sharper, my focus unbreakable, and my ambition boundless. The market for specialized fraud detection was fierce, but our niche, identifying small, transnational laundering patterns that larger banks routinely missed, was highly lucrative. Our proprietary model, which I had conceptualized years prior while commuting to my old job, worked. It was faster, cleaner, and cheaper than the legacy systems used by major financial institutions. Within 18 months, leveraging the desperation of a European banking consortium reeling from a subtle money laundering scandal, we secured our first multi-million-dollar contract. Aon Tech was officially off the ground, scaling rapidly and generating serious profit. By the 2-year mark, Aon Tech was no longer a startup. We had 40 employees, 3 major global contracts, and a reputation for unparalleled efficiency. The venture capital world was circling like sharks smelling blood. Based on early projections and contract renewal rates, Aon Tech was valued at an estimated $50 million. I was no longer a mid-level software engineer. I was a CEO, respected globally in a specific, high-stakes financial sector. I was successful beyond my wildest pre-family obligation dreams. Meanwhile, silence reigned in my personal life. I never reached out. The terms of the text were absolute. Please stop contacting us completely. I adhered to them, not out of obedience, but out of cold, hard resolve and a newfound respect for my own boundaries. I had abandoned their past, and they were no longer part of my future. Then, the first small, almost accidental crack in their silence appeared. It was about 20 months after the text. It wasn't a text, it was a vague, poorly worded email sent to my old, inactive personal address. It was from Sarah, asking about a shared childhood friend who was getting married. A transparent, clumsy attempt to gauge my availability and interest. I opened the email, read the flimsy pretext, and deleted it instantly, blocking the address. The boundary they set was absolute, and I would not be the one to breach it, even if they tried to feign casual contact. The escalation began 6 months later. Sarah, having finally exhausted her latest romantic entanglement and her financial cushion, was facing significant legal troubles. The details were vague, but centered on a bad investment scheme involving cryptocurrency that had led to civil litigation. I knew from years of being their fixer that the complexity of the legal framework and the capital required to navigate it would be far beyond their reach. I received a highly formal and distinctly desperate-sounding letter sent via registered mail to the P.O. box listed on Aon Tech's public corporate filings. It was from a mid-tier law firm representing the Wallace Family Trust. The letter outlined Sarah's legal jeopardy, the massive liability she was facing, and, in polite but unmistakable terms, requested a consultation with Mr. Daniel Wallace regarding potential investment opportunities related to restructuring financial obligations and minimizing exposure. They didn't ask for help, they asked for a business consultation. They had been forced to recognize the chasm between my world and theirs, and the only way to cross it was through the door of my professional success. I smiled when I read it, a cold, dry smile that held no humor. The timing was exquisite. The letter confirmed that their need was now critical, and they had been forced to treat their relationship purely transactionally, exactly how they had terminated it 2 years prior. They wanted to buy my help. My response was meticulously crafted by my chief legal officer, Anya Sharma, the same lawyer I hired to draft the first complex contracts. It was addressed to Sarah's attorney and stated in unforgiving detail that Aon Tech Solutions consulting fees for such specialized financial risk management matters began at $50,000 for a preliminary 2-hour session paid upfront via certified bank transfer. It also included a crucial, non-negotiable clause drafted personally by me. All communication regarding the matter must be strictly professional and limited to the scope of financial risk management as defined by the retainer. Any deviation into personal or familial history, emotional appeals, or non-contractual discussions will result in immediate termination of the consultation and forfeiture of the retainer. The fee, while steep, was the cost of admission. It was a test of their desperation and their willingness to accept my terms. They passed. The $50,000 retainer, minus their bank fees for the transfer, hit the Aon Tech account within a week. The consultation took place on the 30th floor of the Aon Tech headquarters in my office, state-of-the-art, soundproofed boardroom. I had ensured that my sister and my parents, who were present, looking nervous, humbled, and physically uncomfortable in the atmosphere of high corporate power, had to navigate my world. The secured elevators, the biometric scanners, the marble reception area, the quiet efficiency of my perfectly groomed staff. They were visitors in my empire, stripped of their familial authority and reduced to clients seeking a lifeline.